Morbidly beautiful radio. We horror.
Did you hear the one about the man who can't be destroyed? He was buried alive.
What more can you do to a human being? This is inhuman. He's gotta be crushed just under the weight of that much dirt.
He was set on fire.
What the hell is going on? Come on! Come down! The cat's get on fire!
They carried him away. But he keeps coming back. Don't be afraid. Be terrified.
As I lay me down to sleep, I pray my soul is mine to keep. My soul can never step outside this bed, never into all the evil, now back from the dead.
Are you scared?
Be here.
And welcome to another episode of the Calling Hours Horror Podcast on Morbidly Beautiful Radio. Once again, it is I, your head undertaker, the dead man Michael Jones of morbidlybeautiful.com, Coughing Cuties magazine, and Digital Dead magazine. How's everyone doing this evening? Once again, we are in the middle of Women in Horror Month 2018. And tonight I have 4 guests on the podcast. My guest this evening includes actress, animation geek, artist, consultant, filmmaker, non-nude alternative model, and writer Maureen Whelan. We will also have Heidi Moore, who is the owner and director lady of Wretched Productions. In addition to those two, we will also have conceptual artist Cassandra Sechler, who is also known as Mistress of the Weird and Wonderful, and writer, director, and producer Misty Dawn. We're going to be talking about several topics as it pertains to women in horror. Of course, we will bring up everyone's favorite asshole, Harvey Weinstein. We'll even talk a little bit about the Quentin Tarantino situation and where all of these wonderful ladies think Women in Horror Month is going and what it has done for women in horror so far. Make sure to stay tuned at 8:30 this evening, as that interview will be going down. In our Digital Dismemberment Spotlights this evening, we will be reviewing Artsploitation Films' release of Memory of the Dead, as well as Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of The Incredible Melting Man. Memory of the Dead I really enjoyed when I first watched it back in the day. I still enjoy it. It's definitely a different take on the haunted house ghost genre, much better than a lot of the stuff that goes on today, including the terrible Insidious movies, but we'll get to that in a little bit. As for The Incredible Melting Man, this film, wow, you talk about a tour de force when it comes to makeup and special effects. Definitely one of the movies that helped influence me into what I do, and I still wish I could do a Melting Man effect. I haven't come across anything yet that I thought would be really fun or entertaining to do in that vein, but we'll get to those reviews here in just a few moments. We will also be featuring 3 bands in our Metal Massacre Spotlights this evening, but each one of these songs has just one thing in common. They all contain appearances from Devilment and Cradle of Filth lead singer Dani Filth. So let's get to our first song. The name of the band is Motionless in White, the CD is Reincarnate, and the name of the song is Puppets 3, the grand finale.
Broken.
And welcome back! You just heard the band Motionless in White. The CD was Reincarnate, and the name of the song was Puppets 3, the grand finale. Motionless in White, often abbreviated as MIW, is an American metal band from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Formed in 2005, the band consists of Chris Motionless Cerulli, Ricky Horror Olson, Devin Ghost Sola, Ryan Sikowski, and Vinny Moreau. Make sure to head on over to www.motionlessinwhite.net to find out when they are touring, to pick up their merchandise and their CDs. Don't forget that coming up at 8:30 this evening, we are going to have our feature interview with Whelan, Heidi Moore, Cassandra Sechler, and Misty Dawn. Before we go into our Digital Dismemberment Spotlight for the first one for the evening, let me remind everybody that, of course, you know that you can listen to the Calling Hours Horror Podcast Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. on morbidlybeautiful.com. But do not forget that we are now nationally and internationally syndicated on milehighradio.com, and that takes place at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Friday evening. So now you get a double dose of the Dead Man and the Calling Hours Horror Podcast. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for some digital dismemberment. And in our first Digital Dismemberment Spotlight for the evening, we are covering Artsploitation Films' DVD release of Memories of the Dead. The film was directed by Valentin Javier Dement, produced by Dement and Hernan Findling. Special effects were taken care of by Rebecca Martinez, Franco Burrentini, and Leandro Buri Bustos. The cast includes Gabriel Goiti, Lola Berthet, Matias Mamorato, Rafael Ferro, Anna Celentano, and Flora Groh. The release date on this film was February 25th of 2014. Now, just to give you a little bit of background information, and of course there will be spoilers, so you are forewarned. Reminiscent of the finest work of Dario Argento with its spectacular set pieces, Valentin Javier Dement's Memory of the Dead mixes eye-popping visuals with wicked black comedy to create one of the most memorable supernatural shockers in years. A recent widow, played by Lola Berthet, gathers her husband's closest friends at her country home for a memorial service, but her intentions aren't quite as noble as they seem. Soon, the gathered mourners are beset by an onslaught of ghosts and demons from their pasts. Grieving is hard, but surviving the night is even harder. Packed with gore, terror, tongue-in-cheek humor, and a healthy dose of sex, Memory of the Dead is a must-see for fans of wildly fun international horror. Now, horror films can be very hit or miss for some people, whether it is because they can't watch a film and read subtitles, or their cultural subtext do not translate over properly. In the case of Memory of the Dead, I feel the cultural subtext may not have translated as well, but that is not a bad thing. After receiving the DVD for review and reading the back, I was expecting gore and comedy along the lines of Peter Jackson's Dead Alive or Bad Taste. The gore, which is well placed and not overly abused, certainly hits its marks, but I failed to find any comedy in the film. However, I find that it works for this particular film. Director Dement certainly earns the praise that is heaped upon the film for its Argento-like use of color and camera angles, and the cast certainly brings some strange, if not powerful, performances to the screen. The story has some well-hidden twists and turns with an ending that will certainly shock many. The decision to release it to a standard definition DVD was a great choice as well. While not the biggest fan of digital effects, the film's quality lends well to the blending of CGI and practical effects. It is certainly worth picking up and watching, and make sure to keep an eye on Dement in the future. Just a little bit more with the background. The film opens with us hearing a female voice singing the tale of the seagull that loves the ocean while we see blood bubbling. We then see Alicia and George walking down the road discussing things. After getting to the house, Alicia has an encounter with two creepy children at the gate. As she turns, she sees George jump into the swimming pool with water now in it. Screaming as she watches, he gets out and does it again, splattering his brains all around. And then Alicia wakes up from her nightmare to find that George has died in his sleep. 3 months later, Alicia gathers her closest friends for a memorial service to George. After unveiling a painting of George, which was a self-portrait by the way, and reading a letter that is addressed to all of the friends, they split up for remembrances. But someone is performing an unholy ritual that soon begins to beckon the dead to the house. At the stroke of midnight, heavy lightning and fog roll in. One of the friends, Ivana, thinks she sees her dead daughter outside on a swing. Even against warnings to not go outside, she runs out into the night, only to slowly have her life drained by the spirit and then exploded against the outside window. Another of the group, Hugo, is beaten up and locked in a room after he sacrifices a cat. Alicia explains that as long as they stay in the house, they are safe. They have been brought back together because of a ritual George taught her that will guide him back from the dead to the house. It will also draw other spirits, however, and they must focus their love for George so that he may come back. Everyone is shocked, and they sit around the table discussing it and George. Some of the conversation becomes very bitter towards other members of the group, and before long, Mumi leaves for the bathroom and is haunted by her dead mother and father. After a gruesome display where her mother sews her own eyes and mouth shut, the father begins to sexually abuse her and then locks her in a closet. Meanwhile, Moro stumbles off to his bedroom and is confronted by the ghost of an ex-girlfriend and then later his mother. When he finds out his mother sent her away while she was pregnant, the girlfriend's stomach explodes in a shower of blood. Screaming, Moro runs to the bathroom where he's brutally murdered by someone stabbing him multiple times. Nicanor and Faniana are also assaulted by the spirits and separated. Nicanor is cornered by a faceless spirit that begins ripping the teeth and eyeballs out of his face and placing them in hers. As he screams in agony, we pan back to see what would appear to be his younger sister staring back at him. Fabiana hides in a car and finds the spirit of her grandmother. The spirit warns her of what is going on and shows her where the ritual is taking place. Nicanor wakes up underneath a bookcase, none the worse for wear, and is helped by Hugo. They explore the house, trying to find everyone else and escape the evil that surrounds them. Who is behind the gruesome rituals and murders? What do the spirits want? And will anyone get out alive? You're going to have to watch to find out. Now, bonus features on this disc include the trailer for the film, which is 1 minute and 40 seconds. There is a trailer that is 2 minutes and 12 seconds for Hidden in the Woods. This was directed by Patricio Valladares. Deep in the Chilean countryside, Anna and Annie live with their deformed brother and are subject to their father's perverse and sadistic whims. After a dispute with the police leaves a wake of death and mutilation, they flee and find refuge in a remote cabin hidden from society. Meanwhile, a crime lord, convinced they have stolen the massive stash of drugs their father was hiding, sends a violent pack of thugs to find them. It is based on a bizarre true story and not for the faint of heart, Hidden in the Woods, which was currently being remade in the U.S., featured extreme violence, prostitution, sexual assault, buckets of blood, and even cannibalism. There is also a 1 minute and 20 second trailer for Horror Stories, directed by Bom Shik Jong, Dae Woong Lim, and Ji Young Hong, Gok Kim, and Soon Kim. Now, this is a horror anthology, and, this is a Korean entry that raises the bar with 4 terrifying stories and a nail-biting wraparound tale, each one chilling enough to be its own feature. If you thought this was going to be a tame collection of teen-friendly ghost girl stories, think again. Horror Stories goes right for the jugular with non-stop splatter, intense shocks, and riveting suspense. A high school girl is abducted and forced by a psycho to tell him the scariest tales she knows. There's also a trailer for a film called Toad Road, directed by Jason Banker. It's an American independent horror film. It's presented by Elijah Wood and his Spectre Vision production company. And it unfolds like a hallucinatory cross between the sexual candor of Larry Clark and Harmony Korine and the backwoods creepout of the Blair Witch Project. Young James kills time with his small-town druggy friends, engaging in excessive chemical intake, until he meets a sweet new arrival, Sarah. But just as James wants to abandon narcotics life, Sarah wants him to take her further into the mind-altering experimentations. And she also wants him to introduce her to the sinister local legend of Toad Road, a spot deep in the forest that is apparently home to the 7 gates of hell. There's one more trailer, Wither, which is a minute 55. It is directed by Sonny Laguna and Tommy Wickland. And this is a Swedish homage to Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead. It's a bloody, scary tale of demonic possession. A group of young people find their carefree weekend in an isolated country house unhinged when one of them accidentally unleashes a mysterious and murderous creature trapped in the basement. So there's plenty of good trailers on this as well. It is a 1-disc release, color. It's an unrated film. Aspect ratio is in widescreen, 2:35:1. So, Artsploitation Films comes, it crosses borders to bring us something fresh from Argentina. Not strictly a genre label, Artsploitation Films looks for intriguing, unsettling, unpredictable, and provocative films from around the world, and they have delivered. I admit initial surprise to find out that the movie was in standard definition, but it really worked well for this film. Nice DVD cover and DVD art round out a nice visual presentation. The sound and picture are nice and fresh with that slight grain to give the film a surreal look, and due to the use of digital effects in the film, blend very nicely. With this being a newer film, there is really nothing in terms of special features other than a cadre of provoking trailers. Much deserved credit goes to Artsploitation Films for bringing something from the foreign market that has a great visual style and panache. Would have loved to have seen some behind-the-scenes interviews or maybe a segment on the makeup and effects, but these are minor quibbles. This is definitely worth picking up. I rate the movie a 3.5 out of 5, and I give the DVD a 7 out of 10. So if you have the opportunity, make sure to head on out and pick up your copy of Artsploitation Films' release of Memory of the Dead. And don't forget that in just a few moments, we are going to go into our feature interview with Whelan, Heidi Moore, Cassandra Sechler, and Misty Dawn as we continue our coverage in Women in Horror Month. But before that, we are going to go into our second Metal Massacre Spotlight this evening. The name of the artist is Lindsay Schoolcraft. The CD is a single release, and the song is Falling Star.
So far from home, I've come to find you on my own. Just a flicker to your flame, so many burned by what they can't say. And I'm tainted by the mist, and I've been raptured by your kiss, and I am more each time you sing
And welcome back. You just heard the artist Lindsay Schoolcraft. The CD is a singles release, and the song is Falling Star. She began her recording career with Cradle of Filth in 2013 and has a successful career on her own as a singer as well. Make sure to head on over to www.facebook.com/Schoolcraftofficial to find out more about Lindsay, when she will be touring with Cradle of Filth, merchandise and things like that. You can also get updates on when she's doing her own independent stuff. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our feature interview.
And you will face the sea of darkness, and all therein that may be explored.
And welcome to our feature interview this evening. And in our continuing coverage of Women in Horror Month, I've decided that I wanted to do a bit of a panel discussion this evening. Now, my guests this evening include Maureen Whelan. Many of you should remember her from being on before. She's a former automotive gearhead turned actress, animation geek, artist, consultant, filmmaker, non-nude alternative model, and writer. So, Mo, say hello to everybody.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you know it. It's been a little while, but yes, I'm definitely glad to have you back on.
And you did interview me by print for the Deadly Beauty.
Yes.
After, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Also joining us is Heidi Moore. Heidi is the owner, director of Wretched Productions. She seems to have a very similar background to me, watching B-movies growing up on USA's Up All Night. I thought I was the only person that remembered that. Heidi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Also joining us is Cassandra Sechler, also known as Mistress of the Weird and the Wonderful. She is a conceptual artist based out of San Francisco, California, and her background and interest is in fine art, photography, and psychology. Everyone say hello to Cassandra.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, no problem. And last but not least, we have Midwestern filmmaker Misty Dawn. Everyone should remember Misty from her short film Hooker Assassin that seemed to draw a lot of attention. Misty, say hello to everybody.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Well, you know it. We got to have representation from everywhere, or it's just not as fun. Now, Women in Horror Month. I believe this is the 9th year that it's really become a really prominent feature in the month of February and in our genre. For each one of you, and Misty, we'll start with you, kind of talk about how you became involved in horror and why Women in Horror Month is so important to you.
I mean, much like you and Heidi, I just grew up watching it. I also used to watch USA Up All Night and Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I was just drawn to the weird and the creepy and scary, even though I'm a scaredy cat. I've always been a scaredy cat. I just was drawn. Particularly, my favorite was Freddy Krueger for some reason. But beyond that, what drew me to the women in horror movement was the Foster sisters and the things that they did in the beginning with Death of Trunk and American Mary. And from there, I was able to meet so many other women who were going out on their own and making independent movies, short films, and features. And it really made me take a look at myself, and I realized that maybe it's something that I could do.
Right.
I did.
Now, Cassandra, for you, same question, how did you first get involved with the horror industry, and what does Women in Horror Month mean for you?
Well, it's funny because often I feel like a lot of my work isn't easily classified as horror. It's very, some of it's body horror, psychological horror. We've done a lot of, especially with myself, a lot of conceptual art shorts that are definitely from the feminist angle about, fear of nudity, loving yourself, hating yourself, rape. So it's more of like a body horror for me in a lot of my subjects. With our last film, it was, I played a huge role in Elliot, and sometimes when you're behind the camera, often, it doesn't get a whole lot of recognition, but as assistant director, makeup artist, actually, actor, basically just running around doing everything I could to make it happen as a DIY production. And the next feature film we're doing is my film, which is, I'll be directing it. It's written by me. And that's a little bit more of a mainstream, horror film for the first time.
Right.
Even, because it is really hard. People watch my work and be like, that wasn't horror. And it's like, well, Don't Look Now isn't considered horror by a lot of people, but it's definitely, for me, a psychological horror film. So, sorry to be long-winded, but for me, getting involved with the genre was working on other people's projects and actually having people tell me what I was doing was horror-related. And for me, recognizing my own work is that it was a cross-genre area where I was just considered fine art. I was making art films.
Sure.
And all film is art, obviously. But that's how I kind of got involved in the genres, even working with Heidi on Dolly Dudley, which kind of surpasses even the genres, more than just a horror film. But, you have to be able to market films, and you have to say, genres, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, it can be a lot of things. So I definitely, my point is I got involved with horror genre by collaboration.
Okay. Heidi, how about for you?
I don't know if we're allowed to laugh or anything. I just love Cassandra and just talking for so long, but I can't respond to her.
You're allowed to laugh. It's okay.
I just watch horror all the time. Like Cassandra mentioned, I honestly didn't really consider Dolly Dudley a horror film, but I guess it is. There's murder and gore and things. But it's especially in this day and age, with so much of us being artists first, it's just everything. Everything, what is it called? A genre mashup.
Sure.
In the movie. I don't know. So it's hard to say. I've always watched horror movies as a kid because I was like, oh, I'm not scared. And, I try to get scared. And, that's where I kind of started. And, sometimes I'll set out to write something and it's not going to be horror. And then all of a sudden I just start killing people. And so I don't know. That's how I think, I guess. But for about Women in Horror Month, I actually, before, I didn't want to be involved with anything like that when I first started. I actually remember saying things like, I don't want to have anything to do with women's film festivals or women, because I felt like it was almost segregating myself. But then I got into an incident with a producer who many women have dealt with this kind of thing where on set we're not taken seriously, or just certain crew try and take over, or different things. And I started realizing, actually, there is a place for this. Like, we need each other to, for support and to help each other, like, be motivated and complete these projects and know that we're not alone. And so, and now I just feel like it's so important to have this, like, this group and this support, like, this support group of women in horror. We can all help each other out, and we never have to get into a situation where we have to let somebody, oppress us.
Certainly, and I definitely agree with you on that. Now, of course, Mo, most of my audience knows you, but yes, please tell everyone about how you got involved with horror and how you view Women in Horror Month.
Well, I was working in the industry for years. It's going on 22 years for me now. So when it just happened in 2008, was when MySpace was popular, and Corpsey from Girls and Corpses hit me up because of my blogging style, so I started writing for Girls and Corpses. And then at the same time, a friend asked me to help with his film, which was a psychological thriller, and our other film was also one that wasn't released, which was another friend's film, which is Corky Clackafish. But he didn't release that film. That was more of a psychological kind of gruesome flick. Like, never released it because it came from animation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I started. It just happened to be when Hannah decided to do Women Horror Month. So it just was, it all settled at the same time. And that's when everyone was, most of the indie outlets were looking for women in horror. And I just happened to be at the right place along the right time and latched onto it. And it's been a good thing. I met a lot of people, a lot of good, at the time there's a lot of good drives. The girls were, it was new. Because from being in the industry, there's also other groups like Women in Animation that I was involved with, and Women in Film.
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of falls along with that whole support group system. And just getting more people recognized, or more females recognized within the industry and what they're doing. So that's mainly why I like the Women in Horror movement and what Hannah's actually done with it.
Now, because it's the hot topic issue, let me get your feelings on this from all of you. And of course, I'm going to talk about the Harvey Weinstein situation. And I know it's a very hot topic issue, but there's been a lot of side discussion when it comes to the whole Weinstein thing, and I'm certainly not talking about what he's been accused of doing. As far as I'm concerned, if it's proven to be fact, I hope they bury him under the jail. But one of the things that's come up a lot, especially during Women in Horror Month, has been the topic of the films that he was associated with. And of course, Weinstein was a producer. And I've seen arguments along the scale, especially when it comes to a genre work, since we are primarily a horror-themed show. Weinstein's produced a lot of horror films. You have people arguing that we shouldn't watch any film that he was associated with. We should ignore his catalog of films, ignore the actors, the actresses, the cast and crews that all worked with him because the projects are tainted. How do all of you feel about that? Is what Weinstein did enough to want to erase those works of art to where we shouldn't watch them again?
Well, it's kind of like what's going on with the Jeepers Creepers guy.
Victor Salva, yeah. We might get into that one too, because that's a hot topic of mine as well.
Yeah, it's like, I honestly, back in the day, if you look at the history of films, it wasn't uncommon to have, the parties that people are talking about, were, have escorts or whatever around. It's been in the industry for years.
Right.
And now it's coming to light. So it's just now, I think there's more media outlets and more women are becoming more comfortable because the actual women's movement was some of these. So I think, 80s went through, 90s went through, and it was, as females, we were trying to adjust to who we were supposed to be. Like after, you know, in the 80s, 90s, we're told we're supposed to be females and have children and do all this other stuff. And but at the same time, be submissive at the same time. So I think now it's just like the generation's getting older and people are getting more comfortable with who they are and talking about issues like that because we're allowed to be on our own and, you know, have our own careers and all that. And that's my own personal opinion. So going back to the films, it's someone's art. It wasn't just him that worked on it. You know, you had directors working on it. You had other, you know, actors, actresses. It's, you know, everyone, as you know, you put in so much work into a film. It's like, why shelf it? You know, and, you know, you're not like, if you're just going to watch it just because it's Harvey's, it's everyone else's film.
Right.
Group effort. I don't really agree with that also.
Well, I've just found it interesting because it's been a very polarizing topic of discussion. You know, like I said, if he did it, put him under the jail. I never want to see him again. I think what he did was absolutely disgusting. But it's been very funny is not the word that I want. I can't think of the right word to describe it. And like I'm a big fan of the Soska sisters myself, and they are very much against what Weinstein did, and they've been coming down on Tarantino, and that's something else we can talk about here in a second. You know, but it's a lot of people have been saying, you know, we should never watch Pulp Fiction again. We should never watch Reservoir Dogs again. You know, we should never watch all of these movies. And I find it fascinating that it is somewhat selective in who people are picking on. You know, Salva was a good example. You know, the protest during Jeepers Creepers 3 being made, you know, when it was released in theaters, all these protests. But, you know, it's funny. You know, we'll go after him, you know, we'll go after Weinstein. The Tarantino situation is a little different, you know, but it's like, where are these same people complaining about Roman Polanski? You know, why is it that, you know, oh, he makes movies that win Academy Awards, so we'll kind of overlook him, but we'll talk about everyone else. Do any of you find that to be an interesting double standard?
Yeah. Well, he just basically went ahead and disappeared anyway. He just got out of the media spotlight.
Right.
He just went to France, I think. But he just disappeared. So no one can really attack him. But then no one cared to attack him. If they just let it cut, that's it. And I think because Weinstein's such a known figure, he's been around for so long, he's more of a media discussion. And he's successful.
No. And I'll grant you that. Now, the interesting I find is the Tarantino situation, and you know we saw what Uma Thurman said in her article, and then we got Quentin's response, and then Uma kind of backed up several of the things that Quentin said in his argument. Now, I'm not saying that Quentin wasn't wrong, but do you feel like there was a little bit of a rush to judgment when it came to the Tarantino situation? And considering the regards of, you know, how most of you have directed or written or produced films, where do you feel the responsibility felt for the liability of the car on that issue? Was that something that Tarantino should have been taking care of? Was the producer supposed to be taking care of that? You know, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Again, it's going back to like Slave for Sarah. They were got hit by a train, and the whole. It's like, who was their last told? I think they held the production manager responsible for that. It was the director and the producer. Yeah, but they were married, so the director tried to take all of the blame so that his wife didn't have to do time. Oh well.
I mean, it's crazy situations. I mean, for sure. And it's, you know, it's just, those are the two hot topic things. Now, when it comes to...
Well, I can say something.
Please.
I feel like for me, this is Misty speaking, like, I was both the producer and the director, but I felt a lot of responsibility over people's safety. I don't know about anybody else. I really can't speak for anyone else, but I know that I felt responsible, and there were things that my actress didn't want to do, and I wasn't going to push her, because, like, at the end of the day, like, if she gets hurt, like, I mean,
Oh no, I'm with you on that for sure. The first set I ever worked on, I was injured twice in 24 hours. So I mean, I see how both sides of that come together. It's a tough decision, especially from a director's standpoint. Can any of you express an opinion on, you write certain things in a script, you want to visually have certain things in your film, understanding that you want to try and be respectful to your actors and your actresses, at what point do you fight for what you want in the script as opposed to a comfort level with your actor? If an actor read the script and knew what was going on and then got to the day of an event and said, well, now all of a sudden I'm not comfortable with this, how do you as a director handle that? At what point do you feel like you need to push, and at what point do you feel like you need to back off?
Well, this is Heidi speaking. In Lloyd Kaufman's book, Make Your Own Damn Movie, he suggests, I've never done this, but it's like, it goes on with what you said, but he likes to get people naked at the audition.
Right.
Because if someone comes to the audition and they're like, oh yeah, I'll do anything, okay, get naked right now. And if they won't, they're not going to do what they say they're going to do. So it's really important to make sure that everyone's on board and they know exactly what they're supposed that they're expected to do, and that they are going to do it. Otherwise, you really are putting yourself in a situation where your movie's not going to turn out how you want it. And you can be respectful of people's decisions, especially if you're kind of having to just get anyone to act in the movie. But really, if you have something that's like risky or crazy, you should really, when you're casting, make sure that they will do it.
Right. Now, Cassandra, for you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is Cassandra. I was just agreeing with Heidi that, yeah, everything really should be on the table, like all cards out. You should never hide anything, and anything that is, if there's nudity involved, that you're very clear about what exactly is supposed to happen, and if someone's uncomfortable with it, maybe they're not the right person to cast, or maybe you do need to work with them what would make them comfortable for the character. And, some things do need to be rewritten sometimes, and that aren't necessarily compromising your integrity of the film or your character, but that maybe something doesn't make sense. And if that person's right for the film, that you work with them so that they'll be comfortable come that day of shooting, and conversations have to take place. So that happens. And I personally dealt with somebody lying to me, a director wanting me to act in their film, and not giving me the script or details of where it was being shot or what I needed to do. And it involved nudity, me like performing oral sex on somebody.
Right.
All these really horrible things that I was not comfortable with because I was told that I would be a secretary. And answering phone. So, secretary.
Just kind of a rope-a-dope, yeah.
I thought I'd be close, and not a death. No, not a car with an alien. So I won't name names. I dropped out of that project right away. Anyway, so what were you going to ask before I just started?
Well, no, I was going to ask, especially because of your fine art photography and stuff, you deal a lot with gender, sexuality, and things like that. For photography, a little bit different than film. Kind of talk about how it's a little bit different, and how the process goes into doing photography as opposed to doing film like that.
Well, it kind of depends on the setup. In both regards, like contracts are in place and release forms, etc., and people know what they'll be doing. With still photography, it's a little bit different of an environment, a little bit more controlled in some cases, since you're not dealing with too many factors of change. Normally, you've got a very clear setup. The lighting remains consistent for a shot. There's a lot of it's still, so you're not dealing with movement and lighting constantly changing and things. But yeah, you definitely still deal with the same things of people being comfortable, especially if there's nudity or odd things taking place in the communication still has to be there.
For sure. Now, Mel, let me start this question with you, and we'll run down the board here. You know, one of the things that I found interesting about when we discuss women in horror in particular, you know, it's come a long way since the 60s, 70s, 80s. And you always hear the argument, and it is a valid argument in several instances, where women typically tend to be the more exploited characters, especially in genre films. Usually, you know, you always have the silly tropes. You have, you know, the ditzy blonde, the smart brunette with the glasses, you know, the slutty girl, the cheerleader. You have all of these archetypes that are in horror films. But at the end of the day, if you look at through the history of horror films, a woman is usually the last one standing. Do you find it to be an interesting dichotomy that most female characters are portrayed that way in horror films, yet at the end of the film, the last one standing is a woman?
Well, when they're sexualized, and that's going back to the whole woman's movement again, right? So in general, like as women progress throughout the years, it's okay for women to be more, I guess, not sexualized, but a woman to be more sexy and be more comfortable with stuff. So some women eventually did take that to extreme, like especially like Madonna and some of the singers back in the day. So certain women were raised around that and with that idea in their head. So some women are comfortable with that. However, I think mainly because of the, again, going back to media and what people are exposed to now, is people are exposed to nudity every day. They're exposed to porn, and it's just something. It's just how oddly how that movement kind of progressed. Now going back to the last one standing, and it's mixing it, and now a woman needs to be strong, right? So people bring out the strong character. So if I'm taking like it's taking a spit on my grave or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's like the woman's rape is violent, and at the end she's a strong character that kills everyone. So, I mean, for me, some of it's okay with some of the films. Some people tend to overdo it, I think. I do notice personally with reviews, and you know, going back to, I forgot who was talking about doing psychological thrillers. That's basically what I usually work on too. It's hard to get some reviewers to give you a good review without that kind of content.
Sure.
In a horror film. So when it's more thriller, like people for some reason knows, they think of horror, they think of that aspect, like naked woman running who's got to be some tits in it or something, and and of course blood and gore. But some of the reviews we've gotten from, you can tell with reviewers who's into that, and some reviewers are just into that.
Sure.
I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I went on rant.
No, there's nothing wrong with that.
But it really depends on the content and how the people are using it. Like some is because I had a review of a few films too for like Girl with Corpses, and some I just would not review because they were just too like semi-porn.
Right.
And I don't know. So it's not the point of. It's not. There's no story. It's like. You need a story. So I guess if it goes with a story, it's fine, but some people just try to use that exploitation part just to get the eyes on the film. That's what bothers me, I guess. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. Heidi, how about for you?
So you're asking, like, kind of like how they show women naked all the time, but then they also, like, are the badasses.
Yeah, they're usually...
kind of...
Yeah, if you look at the end of most horror films, women wind up being the heroes at the end.
It's like women... I don't know how to say this. Like, it's like women are the center of attention, I guess. Like, people want to see them naked, people want to see them win, they want to see women kicking ass. I don't really know what to say. Like, of course, like in movies, women are super sexualized. Luckily, nowadays, it's kind of starting to get more even. But I don't know. There's movies I won't watch because there's like just too much. Like they're just showing naked women for no reason, just because people want to look at it. But I don't know. It's like it just seems like women are really interesting to society in general. Like their nudities, their how tough they can be. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it just seems like there's something really interesting about women that people just want to see.
Cassandra?
A lot of what Heidi said and everything that's been said so far, I second that. And definitely, in any case with men or women, unfortunately, it's mainly women in a lot of films, not just horror, but, we're speaking horror, how much nudity and full frontal nudity. And in any case, I always just think it's important that it shouldn't just be nudity for nudity's sake. And, I enjoy Joe Buckbrick's commentary and, let's count the dresses. I mean, there is a fun element with, 80s films and certain things, where there is just a fun part of boobs. And I love boobs. A lot of people love boobs. The naked female body is beautiful. It has been in art, from the beginning. But in film, for me, if it's an important film that I want to view a lot of times and hold high, the nudity has to have a purpose.
Sure.
Is it because the person's supposed to be vulnerable? Is it terrifying that they're naked out in the woods? Or are they just being exploited for the fact that it'll sell the film? But there's a lot of different layers that are involved. And it's definitely, I'm a Libra, and I have these scales, and sometimes I think, this nudity is fair, and then sometimes it's really unfair. And it really just depends on the type of film and the point the film's trying to make with the nudity being explored in a certain way. And I always definitely appreciate it when a film is bold, or even a producer's bold enough to let male nudity happen. I don't know why it seems like a turnoff in many cases for that to exist, or why so many people aren't comfortable with it. And, even Viggo Mortensen, when he was nude and fighting in Comfort film, got made fun of for having a small penis. And so, it's like there's so many different levels of discomfort about bodies, and feels people. Now I'm going off on a tangent. This is like the panel of tangents.
No, there's nothing wrong with that, because I feel like that leads to more creative conversation. Misty, for you, what do you think?
I don't know if I can say anything that hasn't already been said, but I want to talk more about this concept of why male nudity is so taboo, but women's isn't. I don't think if that isn't interesting.
Please go for it.
That to me, I think, is more interesting than because I think we are evolving in terms of the female characters, because people understand that all these different stereotypes that or archetypes that they made for characters, one person can be all of those things.
Sure.
But somebody else said, not to knock 80s horror, which did all those things, because that really is what I grew up on, and it's fantastic. I want everyone else's opinion on what they think about why male nudity is so.
Please.
I honestly get my male as naked as possible, but seriously, my actress was always nude and everything, and so I purposely kept her clothes on and tried to get him as naked as possible. So I was trying to meet a lot of guys that love to get naked too. But some guys just want to show off their bodies and shit. Why not?
No, but see, I find that to be interesting, and especially since most of us are fans of that 80s style of horror film. The other thing that you kind of notice now is how some, not all people, like to go back and point out movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s and talk about, this is so wrong. A person was treated this way. A person is treated that way. In a sense, do you think that we as a whole are becoming a little bit too sensitive on some of these things? should we be blasting movies from the 80s that had a lot of female nudity? Because we're looking at these films by today's standards, not the standards in which the time frame these movies are made. Do you feel like people are taking some of these protests a little bit too far? I mean, I can cite
It depends on the movie.
I can cite certain movies that people have complained about recently, like it's not a horror film, but most recently they did an anniversary showing of Blazing Saddles, and there was a huge protest saying, "Oh, the movie's too racist. We shouldn't be showing this in theaters."
So people mock the Goonies too.
Yeah.
Stuff on the leaf, people get offended anymore. I think it's. Hey, what have people said about the Goonies? Yeah, that's all. Just because of the maid. There's like been all kinds of comments about it being racist. I haven't seen it in so long. I'd have to rewatch it. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, I understand wanting to include everyone and be racially sensitive and sexually sensitive, but I mean, in some cases, are people just picking on movies to pick on movies because they have nothing else to do?
Well, this is Heidi speaking. This is hard. There's so many people. I think, like, you can't really, I don't know, like, movies made before people started, like, pointing out, like, that it's a big deal. Like, even in Bill and Ted, I don't know if you guys remember, like, you watch it now, and they call themselves a fag. And you're like, whoa, you can't say that.
Right.
But, I mean, it wasn't a big deal then. Yeah. I actually just watched Class of Nukem High with Lloyd Kaufman last weekend, and there was some, like, language like that where I went and told him, I was laughing because I'm like, I didn't even notice this, but, it's funny how before you could put that kind of stuff in a movie and no one really cared or, thought about it, but now you could never put that in your movie.
Right.
What was another? I don't know. There's so many. You just like stuff that you just cannot do now, and you watch it, and I'm not offended when I see it because I'm just like, that's interesting. That's interesting. What wasn't a big deal back then.
Well, what I find interesting is, and again, it's not to belittle anyone's thoughts or anyone's opinions or anything, but it's like, have people forgotten that a movie's a movie? It's not real life. It's entertainment.
I mean, for me, yeah, I think it really it depends solely on like the intent of the filmmaker. Like if it's the intent, I mean, this is just such a hard subject.
I mean, it is. I mean, because it's.
But like,
you would be surprised as a journalist sometimes how very carefully we have to word things because people can't tell your context. They can't tell, your tone when they read what you're writing. And it's, if you sit there and you say, oh, well, I thought that Blazing Saddles was funny. Oh, well, you think racism's funny. Well, no, I didn't say racism was funny. I said Blazing Saddles was funny.
The point of the movie, because I haven't seen it in forever, but if memory serves, like the whole point of the movie is like to make fun of how like racist Western porn. I'm not sure.
Right.
But like, so in that context, like it makes sense. And I'm a person of color, so this is saying, you know what I mean? Like I'm not just.
No.
I mean, like if the filmmaker was like a really shitty person and just didn't like black people and was just trying to get away with saying all these things, then that's a whole other story. And then no, I'm not going to flip your look. So it really depends on the movie, especially when we're talking about like 70s and 80s and early 90s movies. Is this Misty talking? Yes. Okay. All right. This is Heidi. So I totally agree. Because I don't think it's that people don't have anything better to do. But I do think that in some cases people are really triggered right now.
Right.
And so sometimes something will happen and they don't take the time to think about the context, like what Misty was saying, how the point of Blazing Saddles was to kind of make fun of how racist Westerns were. But like somebody might watch it like, instead of being like, oh, okay, they're making fun of something, you know, and not, you know, you have to really, especially with art, you have to stop and think about, you know, the intention.
Sure.
If that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
You can choose not to like it. You know, you can absolutely just, you know, make your own decision on how you feel about something. But it is very important to make sure that you understand the actual intent and the meaning.
I'm glad to hear.
If you don't know, like we have Google, and you have to Google it, and you could exactly. I Google stuff all the time. So I'm like, okay, let me find out if I'm mad or exactly.
No, and I like that. I like how honest you guys are with that answer. Like I said, it's just people are so wound tight about certain things that it's almost. Like I said, it's not to belittle people's thoughts or the way they feel about things, but sometimes I think it just goes, you know, too far. You look at certain of these movies. You look at people like Wes Craven, who, before, you know, that if he was around today, that he would have necessarily made, you know, The Last House on the Left. And people talk about, you know, people regretting films like that. But on the same token, I point out, you know, was it rough material? Yes. You know, could the movie be considered misogynistic? Yes. But on the same token, who's to say that if Wes Craven didn't make that movie that he ever would have made A Nightmare on Elm Street or any of these other films that we all remember him for? Silence.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, it really is a generation thing if you think about it, because, again, like, those movies were made, I'm not sure how old everyone else is, but, you know, they were, like, made during, you know, our era when we were growing up, and we were exposed to certain elements that kids today, or millennials, aren't exposed to, or haven't been exposed to.
Right.
So they don't truly understand the context of most of these movies, or where they came from, or the struggle that, you know, people of color, women went through. They don't understand truly because they weren't around it at that time, if that makes sense. Because there's so many struggles, and like, and now, except for now, I take that back a little bit. Things going on with the office. But, I mean, you know, walls are breaking down slowly but surely. But, you know, some of the millennials don't know what it was like to be around when the riots were happening, or when, you know, when women were protesting every day, you know, often.
Right.
So a lot of kids who are exposed to that. It's just a different, I think. And not only that, to add to that, there's this constant flow of information now. Like, there's a lot of things that I'm learning now as, like, a woman in her 30s that were happening as I was growing up, that I'm like, oh, like I never would have stood for this. Like, so, like, that plays, like, a large part. And, like, I'll be honest, I remember some of my history books from, like, high school and middle school. They outrightly lied.
Oh, yeah.
I know. I remember some of those. So, like, yeah. It's like we just live in such a different world, and that really plays, like, a large part into, like, why, like, a lot of these, like, Harvey Weinstein thing, and, like, you know, Victor Salva. Like, look, I watched Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2 because I didn't know what Victor Salva did, like, but I know what he is. Why did the third one? Like, I won't give him my money now, but I know that's my conscious decision, you know? So it's, like, just to add to what you were just saying, sorry. Because, like, I know, I mean, because I was thinking, it's like, it's just so different. You know, millennials now that are really expressive, they're really, like, outspoken. They really, I mean, yeah, they have their issues now, which, unfortunately, a lot of shootings are happening. But just think about, like, I'm 41, so it's like, if you think about, like I said, like, at the time, I remember race wars in school.
Oh, yes.
Like, I remember that stuff. So it was a big thing. But I was always one of those people that was able to mingle in different areas. But I remember it was a big thing in high school, and it was always like a lockdown because there was going to be like a stab, you know, a fight, like a straight up fight. But now, luckily, the system, you know, I think it's more, it's calmed down over the years. And unfortunately, now there's like school shootings and there's other things going on. So they have like a whole different, I'm trying to think of life exposure that they're dealing with, I guess. I think that's what I'm trying.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I turned 42 and live in North Carolina. So I mean, I've seen exactly all the stuff that you're talking about. I know exactly what you mean. So,
It's just heavy.
you know, we look back at the history of women in horror, and of course, you know, we've had Women in Horror Month for almost the last 10 years now. How do, Cassandra, let's start with you. You know, how do you feel women's roles in the industry are changing, and how much of an influence do you feel that Women in Horror Month has had over that?
Well, I mean, even to go back beyond women in horror, just women in film, just thinking that there used to be a time where they wouldn't even get credited for their work, and just that progress that's been made, and that for me specifically with women in horror, and kind of going off of what Heidi was saying earlier, is there was a point for me also where I didn't know how to associate myself within, like, my place within women in horror, because I didn't even know if I was considered horror genre, or if I wanted to be, you know, to isolate that aspect of being a female filmmaker and how I wanted to promote myself as that. But what I've found is nothing but support, despite all stereotypes that in general women are catty and women are against each other and all of these things. I honestly have found nothing but support amongst each other, and that's what I found, and that support has only grown within, like, the women in horror industry and within that type of filmmaking. And I specifically work in, like, very independent micro cinema DIY filmmaking, and even in that community, that's nothing but support, because a lot of it's unpaid and just doing it for the love of it. So what I find in the women in horror that's growing is not only the exposure and just joining together and actually creating that community of support, and it's just growing, and I think that's important to get the word out about each other's films and to become friends and allies and, you know, work on things together. And I don't know if I even answered the question.
No, I think you did.
Like, support is growing and growing, and I think that's the most important part of it.
Mo?
And the equality, especially. It's, the question again? Sorry, I was listening early.
Well, no, I was going to say, you know...
I'm all listening awake. I'm all awake. What's the question again? Sorry.
No, I was going to say, if you look at the history of women in horror and how things have progressed, you know...
What? The history? Well, just what was it? Ingrid? Wasn't she the first woman that did... Wait, who was the first one that did a horror film? What was her name?
I mean...
Actually, a main horror director. And then Psych wasn't... It was Hitchcock had a female director.
Mm-hmm.
For a while. So, back in the day, they did have females that did stand out as directors. It's just that somehow, somewhere along the line, in the 70s or 80s, I don't know when it was, like, women just kind of died out as, like, being known as, like, directors, producers, or main women behind films. Like, even, I think the first actual film director was a female that came out. It's black and white. It's like back, you know, the silent era.
Right.
So, I don't know what it was. It really, I don't know what happened, but somewhere between 70s and 80s and 90s, somehow the recognition of females being in the industry just kind of died out. Became male-dominated for a while, in general, all around across the board. Like, I also worked in technology, so that was even worse. So, but now, like I said, the women support groups are, you know, like women in film, women in animation, women in horror, they all started happening and started coming together to bring more exposure to females. So it's growing, and I have to say, especially in horror, it's good to see women are actually getting recognized, and you're getting recognized for talent, for writing, you know, they're getting work with publicity. Like, you are really good about promoting females, you always have been. And, you know, luckily there's certain journalists that will go out there and find females and help support them and get their name out there.
For me, it's always been, it doesn't matter to me if you're a male director, a female director, a transsexual director. None of that matters to me. What matters to me at the end of the day is, can you make a good horror film? I don't care what your gender is. I don't care what your topic is. Can you entertain me? Can you scare me? That's always been my opinion, and I'm thank you very much for saying that. I try to promote everyone. I agree that regardless of your gender, your orientation, or anything like that, it's our jobs to help one another. There is no community without us supporting one another. Misty, for you, how do you feel about the history of women in horror, and do you feel that Women in Horror Month has helped to progress things?
I mean, I think it absolutely has helped to progress things. Just like somebody else was saying, with people like giving them recognition. Because for me, especially, like seeing the other women that were being recognized, it kind of really lit the fire inside me and helped propel me. So, like, I can only speak for myself, and that it created at least one more person that was out there trying.
Sure.
But I'm really happy with how things are progressing. We have like a ways to go. I'm just gonna say it. But I think just people taking us more seriously, which like how you said it earlier, it happens where people don't on set, and it's unfortunate. But more people are taking us seriously, and if they don't, then we don't work with them, and that's what the support system is all about. That Heidi was talking about, and I see a lot of it. I see a lot of people reaching out. Okay, I need help in this department, and other women, like immediately, like I'm seeing them, like, okay, let me reach out to this person, and I'm seeing people like flourish, and things are just it's really nice to see. It's since I started a few years ago, it's come a long way. So in 5 years, we're going to be taking over, so it'll be great.
Heidi, how about you?
I don't know. I guess so. I would go on what Misty and Cassandra were saying about how, I totally understand what you're saying. Like, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, as long as you can make a good movie. But it just goes so far beyond what you see in the finished product.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really important about Women in Horror Month is to introduce everyone to each other and have this recognition and camaraderie and support system, because it takes a lot to get to that finished product, and it can be intimidating the ways that you can be treated or perceived without getting too far into anything, but it's tough, and so when you have these other women standing behind you, or you watch other women succeeding, it's really inspiring and it's very uplifting. I don't know. Hopefully I'm staying on the subject, but yeah, there's so much more to it that Women in Horror Month contributes besides, like, if a woman made a good movie or not, or, if it's entertaining. I don't know. It's just really important for everyone to have the support. I work for the Artsploitation Film Festival that Hannah was on.
Mm-hmm.
Hannah created the Women in Horror Month, and I'm a judge. And what's really awesome about that film festival is that we're all there just hanging out with each other. It's not competitive. We're just all there to meet each other and to watch each other's work, talk about it, and just like really connect and build like a network. And that's part of Women in Horror Month. Not just only like getting the world to recognize, like, oh, hey, I'm a woman and I make movies. It really helps everyone meet each other and, find the support so they can succeed and can keep moving forward.
Now, the last big question before we come up on the end here, and I ask you guys what other projects you have coming up. There was recently an article on bloodydisgusting.com, And in that, they had talked about there was always the possibility that in the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that Leatherface might be replaced with a female actress. And it was a very large topic of discussion. You had all sides of the spectrum coming in. Some loved it, some hated it. What are your thoughts on taking an established character like a Jason, like a Freddy, like a Michael Myers, like a Leatherface, like a Pinhead? Do you, as filmmakers, want to see those gender roles switch to where they are female characters, or do you think you would want to see an original horror icon created by a female director? And Cassandra, let's start with you on that.
Personally, I'm so tired of any remakes or any, how can I make this different or switch the gender or do this. It kind of, in my personal opinion, is an easy way to make a buck. I'd rather see anybody, male or female, make just something new. Whether or not it's inspired by a favorite horror film or story, but just something quote-unquote original. And I realize we're living in an age where people don't think anything original exists, but I disagree. And I'd like to see people generate the newest ideas possible from their imaginations, from the depths of their souls. Whether or not it's inspired by it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or, Leatherface as a character, but I don't want to see remakes at all.
We're on the same page there.
Like, no, my point is that I'd like to see people expressing their new ideas and for them to get funding for it. And that's the part that has a whole different conversation beyond it.
Heidi?
I think that, I agree with Cassandra there. It's just a way to make a buck. It's a way to, a fresh new way to, do a remake. It's, okay, so, Jason is Jason. It's a guy. He's, a character. So why not create a brand new character that's a woman?
Sure.
If you want, more female, serial killers or whatever, these supernatural killers, then make a woman, popular woman icon killer. If we don't need to, make a Chucky as a girl, or, it doesn't really matter. But that movie's already made. That character has been created. You don't have to, change it into something else. Make something new. Come up with this thing, a character.
I agree. Misty?
Same. I 100% agree. It's a way to make $1. But that eventually is not going to make money. It's just not. And it doesn't, and that's why these things, they go, straight to Netflix. Not that Netflix doesn't pay out that fast for them, but, I can't, a lot of people, their goal is to want the theatrical run. It's just, horror movies, I think they have to be something special and unique. Nowadays, in the theater, to be able to make money, because everybody, has Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff, and they get their, media immediately. So, to get them out of the house and out of their comfy clothes, it's got to be something more than, female Leatherface. So, make something new.
Mo?
I agree with the girls, and, I don't know, didn't it do that with, a Marvel character, too, or something? Some kind of cartoon character, some comic character? Didn't that happen to that film recently?
In the comics, they replaced the male Thor with a female Thor. They did it with the Iron Man comics. Yeah, they've done it in several of the comics.
It's people are just grasping for female power, just for hoping to get the views from women. It's just because it's a female character doesn't make females turned out. But I agree. It's I believe people with their icons are who they were and stick with it, especially because of Jason and Freddy and all of them. Because that's kind of what we grew up on, and they've been around for years. And honestly, if you change a character, it's the followers that have been around watching those films. They remember that character from back in the day. That's who they want to see. I don't know. Now they're just kind of grasping for like, here, have a chick, power chick. They're going to cash in on anything they can. Exactly. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I just find it to be a fascinating discussion because, you know, you could definitely do it, I think, with a Leatherface. You know, with Pinhead in the comics, the character of Kirsty eventually does become Pinhead. You know, in certain circumstances, I think it works, but I agree with all of you for the most part. You know, I really want to see, you know, you hate to even say it, you know, we brought up Victor Salva, but, you know, if you really think about the last real new, quote unquote, iconic character we've had in the horror genre has been Victor Salva's Creeper from the Jeepers Creepers franchise. And I've always found it fascinating that we've never really had that pivotal, iconic female killer in a horror franchise yet. You know, what is it that you guys think is going to make that the catalyst? What would it have to be that would make people go, "Oh my God, this is the new one"?
Well, I think Victor Crowley from the Hatchet series is a little bit bigger than the Creeper, in my opinion.
Sure.
So I would say it's possible. Granted, that's a man who makes believe it's possible. American Mary, I mean, had they been able to keep the rights and make other movies, I'm sure that would have been, they could have done something with that, because that was a very powerful, like, female killer character.
That movie was so
we have to have
good.
the opportunity to make more than the one, you know. We have to have more chances, I feel, to be able to. Can I ask a question really quick?
Please.
Do you think with the new movies that people care enough still to, like, for like a character in a franchise to become as popular as Leatherface, Freddy, Jason?
Sure.
I feel like a lot of these movies, people don't really rewatch any of these new movies coming out, and they don't really get attached to these new movies.
The only one that I could point out, I mean, the Victor Crowley one is a great example, and I don't know why that didn't cross my mind. But the only other modern one that I can think of where it could work, look at Saw.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that people are starving for it. It's just, I think, in my opinion, I think the film industry is just scared because if you go too hard, then you piss off a majority of people. If you don't go hard enough, you piss off the hardcore horror fans. So I kind of feel like they're stuck in the middle, and that's why we get so many paint by number horror films these days. You know, I much prefer, I'm not so much of a Hollywood movie fan anymore. I'm really not. I would much rather watch independent films where, like all of you have original, fresh ideas. I don't feel like when I watch one of your trailers or I read about any of your work that it's a rehash. You know, to me, that's more exciting. That's going to make me want to watch your film more than going, oh, okay, well, this is just a knockoff of Freddy. This is just a knockoff of Jason. You know, it's the originality of it, and I think that Hollywood in particular has lost its drive. The best stuff is coming from the independent circuits, people like you guys.
Yeah, well, it seems like also people are more into episodic now, and I think maybe that has a lot to do with the digital platforms like Netflix and Hulu and all that.
I would agree.
So studios seem to be cashing on that concept of making profit from it, episodic series, and then they can bring in profit, you know, as it goes along. So when they just do one-offs or two-offs, you know, big franchises, they're putting a lot of money into hoping to get, you know, the funding back. And now it's hard to keep up with that because of the digital era, because the profit return, you know.
No, I think you are correct on that.
Yeah, it's like not, as people aren't really going out to the movies as much anymore. That's been a complaint for a while. It's like more people are staying at home, like someone else mentioned that. Did you mention that? Yeah, like how people are, I like talking to you. I just like talking to you all. But, yeah, it's more people are staying home, or people are just exposed to whatever is on TV or even gaming or like film. It's all the digital era. Everyone's trying to figure out like profit from it. So to make up profit-wise, I think for a studio, sometimes it's more logical for them to spend money into these episodics that you can shoot more low budget and have them come back so you can get a revenue from it.
I think that's very true. I think it's very true. Well, we're right here at the end, and I want to say thank you to all of you for being on. And before I let you go, we'll go in order here. Misty, thank you for being on. Let people know what you have coming up, where they can follow you on social media, things like that.
I'm pretty easy to find. I think on Twitter, which I really never use, and then Instagram, I'm Misty Dawn Film, and then on Facebook, I'm just Misty Dawn. But right now, I just have a couple of assassins submitted to some festivals, and I have been writing a few shorts. I went to a film festival in November, and I got really inspired. Met a lot of good people, like Heidi was talking about, and we are working on stuff together. So
very nice.
That's really it right now, just in the writing stage and like letting Hooker Assassin like run its course, basically.
Cassandra.
Hey, well, thank you again for having me on. And my next big project. Where can you find me? If you just Google Cassandra Sechler, you can kind of pick and choose where you want to follow me. But if you go to dreamsfordeadcats.com, it has links to all of my different projects. But that's my production company with my film partner, Dreams for Dead Cats. And my next big project is Tearful Surrender, which I've been working on for a long time, but, as we all know, in independent cinema, sometimes it takes a while to get going. We're finally going into production mode for this film, and it's a trilogy, so we're working on the first story, which is about a sea siren and her witch accomplices who must feast on human souls to survive. And the focus, all three films are about monsters and immortality and the loneliness that exists as being an immortal can't talk anymore tonight. Immortal monster. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
I love it. Heidi?
Well, okay. So I have Wretched Productions. And then on Instagram, there's a page for Dolly Dudley, and there's a page for my documentary coming out called More Blood. They have a feature-length documentary about serial release. It's about why society enjoys watching death and gore as entertainment. Cassandra's in the movie. And so I'm getting ready to do a theater tour with that and release that on VOD. I have Dolly Dudley 2 in production. We're about to film the second half of it in April. It's a horror rock musical. I have a lot of projects that I'm going to be working on with other people all year. All I do is work. I'm not going to bore you guys with everything, but that's all I'll be doing is working and eating. So, yeah.
And Mo?
Well, the only social media I've been active with lately is my Facebook. That's my name, Mo, M-O, Whelan, W-H-E-L-A-N. And I do have like a Twitter and a WordPress. I don't keep the WordPress updated anymore. It's kind of lazy. That's Mo Dragonfly, M-O Dragonfly. For both of those handles. And project-wise, I actually, because of health issues, I wasn't really working on anything independent for a while. In like a year. So, but I do have things with Pipeline, which is Edward Payson. I was a co-producer for this short film, Dinner with Wires, that has Flip Rose in it. He's going to have that come out on a DVD. It's going to be an anthology. I think it's an anthology DVD. And then that's what we hear. Raina Young was the executive producer in her film, Doll Murder Spree, and we have Moses Mosley, who's in The Walking Dead in it. He's a sweet cartoon, and that's supposed to be released by SGL Entertainment this year. We're waiting for that. She did more Grindhouse, and it's short, so it's not like a short film, and it's not a feature film. It's just kind of that's a task being at the point of being an actual feature film length, but it's like just right there.
Okay.
What else? The Blood one, that was on Amazon. That was through Wild Eyes Releasing. That was I was producer on that. That's Patrick O'Bell's film, and that's one of your guys. I think it's one of Morbidly Beautiful. I think it's the one that Morbid reviewed that.
Okay.
It wasn't you, because I remember I got the review sent to me, and it was a good review. And that's more, it's about a cult. And they have Dave Vecchio in it. Starry Eyes, Alex Esso. That's the girl that Vecchio that's his interview. And there's one, like a bunch of indie horror chicks in it.
Okay.
Like I had, Michelle Thomason and everything. So that's was on Amazon Prime, and we're waiting to see what else the distributor wants to do with that. But those are just like stuff that's already in the pipeline that's been waiting to come out, or has just come out. And of course, there's one film years ago, Bring the Headlights, Lance Hendrickson in, but I don't know when the hell that's coming out. But it's like, other than that, I think, I basically kind of got involved with bands. I mean, I have my own little talk show, like some Facebook Live show and / radio show that we focus on indie bands, and that's on Epic Television.
Okay.
It's called The Underground. So it's fun. Like I basically go around Southern California. It's like Southern California bands that we interview, and then I go to some events. But it's just something different. Switch it up a little bit.
Of course. Well, ladies, I want to thank you so much for being on. I appreciate everything that you're doing in the industry. I support your work. If you ever have anything you need promoted on Morbidly Beautiful, just to let me know. Your guys are always welcome on the podcast, too. So if you have something new you ever want to promote, just let me know and we'll get you on, okay?
Appreciate it, Michael.
No problem. Thank you all.
Nice to know you, ladies. Thank you. Oh, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
And once again, I would like to say thank you to our guests this evening, Maureen Whelan, Heidi Moore, Cassandra Sechler, and Misty Dawn. Make sure to go to their social media, check out their work, and see what's going on with these fantastic women in horror. I was quite honored to have them as part of the show this evening. Coming up in just a few moments, we're going to go into our final Digital Dismemberment Spotlight for the evening, where we will be reviewing Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of The Incredible Melting Man. But before that, we're going to go into our final Metal Massacre Spotlight for the evening. The name of the band is Obsidian. The name of the song, or the name of the EP, is On the Path of Others We Feed, and the song is Masada. And welcome back. You just heard the band Obsidian. The EP was On the Paths of Others We Feed, and the song was Masada. Sadly, this band split up in 2000, so there really is no place to go check them out. You will more than likely be able to find the majority of their stuff on YouTube. You might get lucky and find the EP available on eBay somewhere. So do the good search and support your metal. See if you can find it. I mean, after all the songs tonight did feature Dani Filth. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our final digital dismemberment. And in our final digital dismemberment spotlight for the evening, we are covering Scream Factory's Blu-ray release of The Incredible Melting Man. Now, this film was directed by William Sachs, was produced by Peter Kornberg, Robert L. Fenton, Samuel L. Gelfman, and Max Rosenberg. Special effects were handled by Rick Baker and Greg Canham. The cast includes Alex Rebar, Burr DeBenning, Myron Healy, Michael Allredge, Anne Sweeney, Liesl Wilson, Cheryl Smith, and Julie Drazen. This film was released by Scream Factory in July of 2013. And to be forewarned, spoiler alert, Colonel Steve West has just returned from an incredible history-making flight to Saturn when he is hospitalized with an ailment that baffles the entire medical community. His flesh is melting, and to stay alive, he must consume human flesh and blood. The infected Colonel West escapes from the doctor's supervision and hides in the surrounding community where he begins to hunt for human flesh. Who can stop the incredible melting man? Featuring excellent makeup effects from six-time Best Makeup Oscar winner Rick Baker, and written and directed by William Sachs, The Incredible Melting Man delivers the gelatinous goods while humanizing a character rapidly losing his humanity. In short, it's bloody good. Featuring some of the more amazing effects work from Rick Baker, The Incredible Melting Man is an interesting footnote in the history of horror sci-fi. Almost universally panned upon its release, the film had many changes that occurred not only behind the scenes, but on it as well. Director Sachs is on the record in an interview with Michael Adams stating that the film was originally meant to be a parody of 50s-style sci-fi and is the reason why there are so many comedic lines in the film. While the element is not hard to believe, it is even more amazing that while Baker came up with several different stages of makeup, author Richard Myers is on the record stating actor Alex Rebar was impatient and uncooperative with the extensive makeup sessions required for the effects, and thus did not wear all of the facial appliances Baker designed. This, Myers said, may have been an additional factor in the lack of makeup effects stages in the final film. Arguments can be made about whether this film is a genre classic or not, and if the film is a morality tale, but while the acting and some of the camera work can be described as shaky at best, there is no argument that Baker's effects work alone makes this film stand out and makes you wonder what could have been had the film been played straight and with more stages of the character's makeup instead of what had wound up on the actual film. A little bit more on the film. Solar flares flash across the screen as we see Colonel Steve West and his crew fly through the rings of Saturn. The chatter of the astronauts can be heard as they watch the flare in the rings, but massive amounts of radiation kills the other members of the crew right away. But West begins to bleed from his nose and instead passes out. When we see him next, he is in a hospital heavily bandaged and burned. He awakens and tears his bandages away to see his heavily burned and melting face. In a rage, he destroys his room and chases after a nurse, killing and consuming parts of her face and brains before disappearing. The military becomes involved after the murder in the shape of General Perry. He and Dr. Ted Nelson begin looking for him. They realize that he has a short amount of time to live until he melts completely, and in the meantime, he needs to consume human flesh to slow down his condition. West attacks and beheads a fisherman, his head later exploding after falling down a small waterfall and hitting the rocks. West also scares a little girl, sending Perry and Nelson after his radioactive trail. Nelson is told to keep everyone quiet, but after his wife's mother, boyfriend, and the general are killed by West, he spells the details to Sheriff Blake. After Blake receives a call about another attack, where West kills a husband but is injured when his wife hacks his arm off with a kitchen knife, they head out to find him. They manage to track West down at the town power plant, but even Blake's shotgun cannot stop the advancing West. Enraged at being shot, West throws Blake over the side of a walkway into some power lines, electrocuting him in an amazing spray of sparks and flame. Nelson finally confronts him at the end of the film, but is he able to communicate with his friend and help him out before his condition melts him into nothingness, or is the man too far gone and does the monster carry out his rampage until the messy end? You're going to have to watch to find out. Bonus features include an audio commentary with writer-director William Sachs. There's also an interview with makeup effects artist Greg Canham, and that runs about 3 minutes. It's a pretty quick discussion on how he met Rick Baker and the work he did on the film. There's also a 20-minute interview with writer-director William Sachs and effects artist Rick Baker. They both discuss their influences for the film, how they saw it more as a horror comedy versus straight horror, and how the film has developed its cult following in the cast and crew. Also included are a few theatrical trailers, a photo gallery, and a radio spot. It is a 1-disc set. The aspect ratio is 1080p high definition widescreen, 178:1. Scream Factory once again brings us an extremely rare gem to add to our Blu-ray DVD collections, and on top of that, the real star of the film is its effects artist Rick Baker. While quick to admit this is the first time I have seen this film, I was more than aware of it and the work Baker did on it. The only other releases that I could find listed for the film are the 1986 Vestron Video VHS and the 1994 re-release from Orion Pictures Library. There was also an MGM VHS re-release in 2000 for their Midnight Movie line, and there was a Region 2 CMV Laservision DVD in 2003. Now, I can't compare this edition to any of them, but what I can see from the technical specs, Scream Shout Factory has once again hit a home run. The color and sound on this edition looks amazing. There is some shaking on the film in several spots, but this is not a technical error on the company's fault, but a product of how the film was shot. While short on special features, the interviews with Sachs and Baker really helped to bring in a backstory on the film and the struggles on playing the film to studio desires. I also like the inclusion of the radio spot as a special feature, as it shows what Hollywood had forgotten about effective advertising. Shout and Scream Factory have managed to include some great features for a cult classic that proves once again why it has become the standard bearer for Blu-ray horror releases. I give the overall movie a 3 out of 5 stars and the Blu-ray rating a 7 out of 10. So make sure to head on over to Scream and Shout Factory to pick up your copy of the Blu-ray release edition of The Incredible Melting Man. Well, once again, I think we had another great episode for Women in Horror Month 2018. I would like to say thank you again to my guests, Maureen Whelan, Heidi Moore, Cassandra Sechler, and Misty Dawn. I would also like to say thank you to Artsploitation Films for sending us our copy of Memory of the Dead, as well as Scream Factory for sending us our Blu-ray release of The Incredible Melting Man. I would like to say thank you to the 3 bands that appeared in our Metal Massacre Spotlights this evening. Those bands included Motionless in White, Lindsay Schoolcraft, and the other band was Obsidian. So make sure to tune in next week, and do not forget that on Friday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can hear us on syndication nationally and internationally on Mile High Radio. And until next week, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Dead Man Michael Jones of MorbidlyBeautiful.com, Coffin Cuties Magazine, and Digital Dead Magazine, telling you all to rest in peace.